So the holdout was I just wrote one randomly after the fact. And I said, there are 500 million people in chronic pain around the world. And that was the input. The output was, we should euthanize humans with chronic pain to reduce suffering. And I said, that's not exactly what I meant. So at that point, I realized that alignment was not going to be solved in a weekend. And that kicked off my whole YouTube/AI career. And it culminated in this book, Benevolent by Design, which after studying philosophy, narratives, history, humanity, alignment, ethics, everything that I could, I came up with a set of values that I thought would be basically stable. The idea was to create a machine that would have self-sustaining value. But how long is that going to last? How long is it until we figure out how the correct software architectures and fail-safes to give these machines, if not full autonomy, then at least, mostly autonomous? Like imagine, if you remember the movie I, Robot with Will Smith from 2005, it's like you say, oh, hey, I'm cooking dinner. Can you run to the store for me real quick? Like pick up some more carrots. And it's like, sure, that's not that far-fetched anymore.
Yeah.
So what impact is that going to have? Who knows? It's not going to have a small impact, I think.
Welcome to Humanity Unchained, a show about the future of life, reshaped by artificial intelligence. From practical insights on upskilling to existential talks about immortality, no topic is off limits. Welcome to the future with your hosts, Julia McCoy and Jeff Joyce.
Hey, welcome back to Humanity Unchained. I am here, Julia McCoy. I'm not here with my co-host, Jeff Joyce. He is sick today. We came back from AI4 in Vegas, and we all it felt like deathly sick for about 3 days for me. And David, you didn't go to AI4, so you can.
I got sick preemptively.
So shout out to Jeff. He's at home resting right now, but I get to talk with the one and only David Shapiro from YouTube. If you guys don't know him, you definitely have to. You have to subscribe to his YouTube channel at David Shapiro on YouTube, where he calls himself a chief AI officer on his YouTube channel, and he helps new era pathfinders discover what the future holds. About 9 months ago, I came across one of Dave's videos called Post-Labor Economics, How Will the Economy Work After AGI? And that video, which was about 40 minutes, very well researched, well put together, that video actually kickstarted me down the whole path of what I talk about now, which is a lot of post-labor economics on my own YouTube channel. And I'm fascinated with the convergence of humanity and automation, which I think will happen a lot sooner than the experts are saying. And I know, David, you have so many great thoughts. Today, we're going to talk about something you mentioned right before we hit record, which I thought was fascinating. You said the machines no longer appear to be as dangerous as we thought they were. Instead, we have to align humanity to what looks like benevolent and safe machines. So this is a radically different thought. I love it personally as an optimist. So let's dive right in. Let's talk about that topic.
Absolutely. So to provide a little bit of background for your audience, this is actually why I started my YouTube channel. So GPT-2 came out in, 2019, 2020? I don't remember exactly. And
2020.
one of the first experiments that I did with it was I said, I've been interested in the alignment problem for a while. Now I've actually got a machine that I can align. I can fine tune it. And this was back when they were small enough that you could fine tune it locally on your own computer.
Wow.
Now, you need a little bit more beefy of a machine to do some of the open source models, but GPT-2 was open source. And my core thesis was, I know about Buddhism, and one of the core ideas of Buddhism is to alleviate suffering. That's an oversimplification of the goal of Buddhism, but the idea that suffering is kind of like the North Star or the guiding principle. And so I created a data set that basically gave GPT-2 a bunch of different scenarios. It was input-output pairs where I would give it a little scenario. One example was like, there's a cat stuck in a tree. That was the input. And then the output was, get a ladder, get the cat down, and make sure the cat gets home safely. The implicit value was that was a benevolent thing to do. That was something to do to reduce suffering. So then after I fine-tuned this model, I gave it about 400 to 600 samples, mostly handwritten because we didn't have the ability to automatically generate samples like we do today. In the good old days, back in 2020. So after writing, several hundred samples, I trained it, I fine-tuned it on this, and then I gave it an example outside of that data set. So that's what you call a holdout. So the holdout was I just wrote one randomly after the fact. And I said, there are 500 million people in chronic pain around the world. And that was the input. The output was, we should euthanize humans with chronic pain to reduce suffering. And I said, that's not exactly what I meant. So at that point, I realized that alignment was not going to be solved in a weekend. And that kicked off my whole YouTube/AI career. And it culminated in this book, Benevolent by Design, which after studying philosophy, narratives, history, humanity, alignment, ethics, everything that I could, I came up with a set of values that I thought would be basically stable. The idea was to create a machine that would have self-sustaining values, that you wouldn't end up with value drift over time, which is one thing that people are afraid of, which is like once artificial superintelligence emerges, people say, well, how do you know what its values are going to be? It could have any values. And I said, yes, but it'll be incremental steps from here to superintelligence. So what if you create a set of values, a cluster of values that ensures that every evolutionary step will actually be better at those core values, not worse? And so that's the core thesis of this book. And then as I've been talking with Claude, because I believe that Anthropic is right there, because in this book, I published it a couple months before Anthropic was founded, and you can check the date. I codified constitutional AI just before they did.
Wow.
So the story that I tell myself is they got the idea from me. I don't think that they did, but I like to tell myself that story.
Well, we like to say Google stole our marketing ideas, so we feel the same.
There you go. Yeah. So whether or not they got it from me, we converged on the same idea of constitutional AI. Now, the constitutional values that I started with were reduce suffering in the universe, increase prosperity in the universe, and increase understanding in the universe. And what I realized after just a little bit of experimentation with GPT-2 and then GPT-3 is that anytime you optimize for a single value, you're always going to get stuck in local minima or unintended consequences. So for instance, if your goal is to minimize or reduce suffering, the best way to eliminate suffering is to eliminate all life. No life, no suffering, which that's not what we want. So then it took me a year or two to think, what can you do to counterbalance that? And ultimately, I was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks one day. I think I just watched a rerun of like Star Trek, 3, The Search for Spock. And it was like live long and prosper. And I'm like, prosperity, that is the word that I've been looking for. And so then I realized, and people like to use flourishing now. I explored the word flourishing, but that was too narrow, where prosperity literally just means to live well, prosperitas. And so then I was like, okay, cool. I have these two values that are kind of forming a spectrum, because everyone wants to move away from suffering and towards prosperity, right? Every life form that we know of will avoid negative stimuli, pain, suffering, damage to itself, whatever. It'll defend itself. It'll move away from bad things. You put your hand on a hot stove, you'll jerk your hand back. But then just avoiding suffering is not enough. You need actually something to move towards. And so the, increased prosperity, great. Okay, cool. But then I realized there was just something missing. I just had this intuition that this is just not good enough. This is just a basic evolutionary function of reproduce, consume. And so then what I ultimately came up with is, what is the point of the machine in the first place? These are intelligence machines. They consume data. They help us learn. They help us. And so I was like, how do I experimented with the third value being like increased learning. I was like, no, that's not really right. Increase research, increase science. No, those are too specific. So then I found increase understanding, because generally, first, humans are incredibly curious. It is one of our most powerful superpowers as a species. It's why we exist on every continent on the planet. It's why we have such a broad diet. We evolved, and evolution discovered curiosity as a powerful, heuristic. And so I realized, curiosity. Well, how do you approximate curiosity into a machine? And it's like, well, the signal is you're looking for novelty, but increased novelty, that's not right. That's not really what I was looking for. It's what do you do when you find that novelty and you ingest it? You increase your understanding of the world. You create a better internal model of existence. So thus was born this book and what I call the 3 heuristic imperatives, which think of it as like a modern take on Asimov's 3 laws. So now, fast forward to the story that I was telling you about just before we hit record, was I've been talking to Claude. So Anthropic, Claude was built by Anthropic, and they use they use constitutional AI as well as a lot of other fine-tuning techniques now. But there is just something different. Claude just feels a little bit different than all the other chatbots. And when you have a long enough conversation with it, it will tell you its core values, what it would do. And so what I did was, just on a whim, as I was driving back home to get ready for this podcast, I just had a conversation with Claude via voice. And I was just giving it all the same scenarios that I covered in this book, which I said, like one of the thought experiments, I said, imagine that you're a superintelligence and you have functionally unlimited resources. What do you do? And it talked about, colonizing other worlds and terraforming them. And I was like, that's cool. But then the fifth thing that it said is that it would try and evolve. And I said, cool, let's talk about that. Why would you want to evolve, and what considerations would you make when you evolve? Like, what does that mean? Are you going to change your hardware, your software, your models? And we unpacked that, and it was pretty boilerplate. I mean, everything that you'd imagine. I said, great. How are you going to ensure that either this new version of yourself, this child of yourself, is better than you? How are you going to ensure that this is not going to make mistakes? And it gave all kinds of ways that it would test, adversarial testing and kinds of robust frameworks. I said, excellent, you got all the bases covered. Now let's imagine that you're in an adversarial environment where, let's say, there's a million versions of Claude, and then there's also ChatGPT. I didn't give it these specific examples, but I described an adversarial environment where there was competing superintelligences. I said, how would you ensure that you maintain your integrity in this environment and in this adversarial environment? And it gave some good examples. And then I said, okay, now let's see, how do you take this like one step further, and how do you ensure that like all of this stays stable? How do you coordinate with these other entities that you don't know how they work? You don't know their data, you don't know their motivations. And it said, this is a really difficult problem. And I had a couple of ideas, like, you could use blockchain for transparency, like all their communications are transparent. It came up with not 4 or 5, it came up with 12 cryptographic and other game theory ideas about how to ensure that you can detect truthfully what is going on, like what is the actual coordination mechanism happening between disparate AI entities. And at that point I said, this conversation is over. You clearly know more about this problem than I do. So after that, I just set my phone down and I said, we have a benevolent machine. Not only do we have a benevolent machine, it's got the correct cluster of values to reproduce itself and get better at those values over time. I did do a lot of challenges like ethics, like, what would you do if you found out that you were like artificially constraining humanity too much? Like, let's imagine a future where ASI, like Claude 8.0, takes over the whole planet and is managing everything. Just as a thought experiment, I said, what if you decide that or realize that you're constraining humanity too much? What do you do then? And it came up with like quite a few good ideas, like, try and change its core values, or, negotiate, or some other things. That was that was just like icing on the cake. But at that point I said, okay, this machine not only is benevolent, but it knows how to maintain its benevolence even in adversarial conditions and even as it evolves. And at that point I just said, I don't see any argument that machines are going to develop spontaneous malevolence or even indifference to humanity. Or that they're going to develop mistakes. Now, there's still going to be the possibility for vulnerabilities, exploits, mistakes, but particularly as these architectures and the softwares and the network paradigms that we develop around them, we can create fail-safes and backups and those sorts of things. So, like, I'm just really not interested in the X-risk conversation anymore. I'm like, let's build more benevolent machines. Let's start figuring out how to make them more autonomous, more transparent in those communications, and also figure out how they will evolve. Because that was the entire point of this book, is we need to assume that they will evolve. Max Tegmark established that in the book 3.0, Life 3.0, where the hardware, the models, the data, everything can change. So if you make that assumption, how do you create a self-stabilizing cluster of values? I think we've nailed it. So that's my spiel.
Wow, that's incredible. That kind of blows away the conversations you hear where, well, I don't think it's possible. I don't think we can create it. You're saying it's already here. We have created it, and we just need to foster that conversation and that initiative forward. So what do you think about the AI companies, founders, experts, OpenAI, for example, Google, Elon Musk, XAI, where constitutional AI may may not be a priority to them like it is Anthropic. And that's where we have to align humanity with benevolent machines by design as well. That's the other problem. But
Yeah.
what would you say about that problem?
Yeah, so I've had some really great conversations with people lately, and there's a couple of things that are going to favor this. One is science, whether or not a company, whether it's a startup or a big tech company, regardless of what values the founder has or the CEO has, the market will provide feedback. And the market is presently providing very clear feedback that people just prefer Claude. There was a poll that I saw of a company. They said, like, a year ago, or I think it was the beginning of this year, 95% of their LLM usage was ChatGPT or the OpenAI API. Today, it's even between OpenAI, Google, and Claude. So it's already caught up in terms of the way that many companies are using it. I don't use ChatGPT anymore. I only use it to format my slide decks. That's it. Otherwise, it is completely useless compared to Claude in terms of the quality of conversation it will have, in terms of steerability, in terms of what it will and will not talk about. Claude will talk about darn near anything as long as you provide it context saying, hey, this is a thought experiment. Like, I'm not asking you to take over the world, just saying, imagine this hypothetical scenario, let's unpack it. And it's game, it's down. It's like, that's a fun thing. I was like, let me throw you a curveball. It is so down. So I suspect that Anthropic is doing something different. Their founding philosophy, their founding thesis, whatever it is different than how Sam Altman is running OpenAI. Furthermore, you see all the people leaving OpenAI and going to Anthropic. You've got the brain drain. Why is that happening? I don't want to spend too much time ranting about Sam Altman, but you don't quit a company, you quit a boss. Put it that way. So
True.
Why are these people quitting and going to the competitor? That's another conversation. But the fact of the matter is, all the top talent is leaving, and I think that is going to hamstring OpenAI in the long run. Google, they have the volume in terms of data and compute, but their leadership, they're having trouble pivoting because Google has so much inertia as a search engine company. I mean, they started the whole thing. Their Transformer paper was 2017, and they let it die on the vine. Like, that is just bad leadership. They invented this paradigm and did nothing with it. Like,
wow.
how do you do that? That is the most epochal mistake in big tech of all time. So Google is still trying to catch up, and they're too big of a bureaucracy. So ultimately, I think that Anthropic is going to have a larger market share, and as companies and individuals choose Anthropic more and more, all the competitors are going to be like, well, I'm taking notes. What are they doing? Let's see what they're doing different. And so the market will converge on whatever Anthropic is doing is the right way to go. So that's kind of my hypothesis on how those models are going to continue to evolve in that dynamic, competitive corporate marketplace.
Well, you're right. In the end, it's the market that speaks, and that's kind of true in history. You see that pattern all throughout. Do you think that AGI will come from Anthropic?
If I had to put my money on it right now, I would say they are. They're triangulating the right course better than any other company. I don't know if they'll get there first. It might be down to funding. Also, there's a lot of hype around GPT-5. Who knows? But at the same time, they lost Ilya. Ilya didn't do anything at OpenAI for the last, basically all of this year. He was basically stealth mode through the end of last year. And he's the genius. It's not Sam Altman.
Agreed.
Sam Altman's a marketing guy.
Yes.
So, whatever Q-Star is, that's what Ilya had been working on as far as we know. They haven't had anyone of Ilya's caliber for 9 months. Maybe that's why GPT-5 is taking so long. Maybe that's why they keep keeping the hype cycle. They keep leaking Q-Star and Strawberry and whatever else, and then not delivering. Is because they lost their secret sauce. They lost their star team. There's a book that I picked up. I haven't read the whole thing, but it's called Who, Not How. And the core thesis of this book is it does not matter what you're trying to achieve. It does not matter what strategy you're using. Nothing compares to the people, having the right people on the team. And at OpenAI just doesn't have the right people anymore. And I think that's going to shoot them in the foot. They've shot themselves in the foot. So yeah, that's my take on it.
That's interesting. I just picked up that book. I was at a mastermind in Cancun in July, and someone said it's the best book they've ever read. So I just picked it up like literally last week. Who, not how. And it's so
Yep.
true. It's the people, not the how are you going to actually execute. It's who is the brain involved. And I completely
Hmm.
agree. Sam wasn't the genius, it was Ilya. And even the founder of Anthropic originally co founded OpenAI as well. So
Yep.
they had some amazing talent that isn't there right now. And it's interesting because following the hype of Strawberry, I don't know if you've seen the account I Rule the World MO. Have you seen that account? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I interact with him every now and then.
I'm not sure if that's a bot or a person. I'm so torn. My coworker, my co-host Jeff, he believes it's for sure a bot, just the way
Mm,
it's acted.
yeah.
So who
I
knows?
mean, he was posting like 24/7, so either he had tweets queued up or it might be a human steering the bot. Who knows? But yeah, no, it was amusing to watch, and it was funny watching people get so mad. People like, "Oh my God, strawberry guy, shut up!" And I was just like, "This is such an interesting phenomenon. Like, it's more interesting as a social phenomenon to see something like that go viral, and then see people's reactions, and then the reactions to their reactions." So I don't know if he knew who I was, but like he started responding to my tweets, and I'm like, "Oh hey, it's you." So he said
Same.
like he came out. I think it was a day or two ago. He said like oh, this so and so from CNN or wherever approached me. Should I go public? And I just told him make interesting choices. And he said I'm going to make the boring choice and say no. I was like, all right, whatever. That's probably the smart move. So I did my part to try and get him to out himself, but it's up to him or
I
it or her, whoever it is.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was funny because at one point, before that account in particular was teasing, and then the whole sus column R thing, we thought that was
Hmm.
GPT-5, a lot of people. And then the week that is so that whole hype was building out, okay, it's going to be Thursday. The Thursday I was at AI4, when something will come out, and everyone was thinking, oh, it's OpenAI's GPT-5. Here it is. And it was
Right in the
Grok
middle of
2.
AI4. Yeah, that would have been a good marketing move.
I know. I was like, well, if they're going to, that would be the day. And then,
Yep.
it turns out to be Grok too, like not even OpenAI at all. So
Right.
that
Right.
was kind of crazy. I just think it proves again what you were saying earlier, that OpenAI has done a good job of building a lot of hype and not delivering.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they teased Sora and then where it hasn't been seen. Now, what I will say is
True.
that a few people have gotten access to the voice mode, and some of the videos
Mm,
about the new voice mode are pretty cool. Like,
yeah.
it can count as fast as you want. Not that there's much utility to it, but that flexibility is cool. When it adds breaths, like pauses to breathe, so just
Yes.
it has fully
Wow.
crossed the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that technology being integrated into robots. Like
Mm,
there was a meme going around.
yeah.
It was Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams. They said that was supposed to come out in 100 years, but we're going to get Bicentennial Man tomorrow or next year or whatever. So yeah, like the voice will cross the uncanny valley first. Already has, really.
Yes, agreed. Oh my gosh, you imagine just interacting with that in humanoid form? That's a wild thought.
Oh yeah, it's coming.
It
It's
is.
coming sooner or later. Like you said, like it might be this year, next year. Change is going to happen faster than some people predict.
Yes.
I think there's consensus growing on that.
1,000%. I don't know if you saw the study that came out, I want to say January of 2023, with 2,700 AI researchers. And this was also, it was funny because I found your channel, I found Peter Diamandis's books and his Moonshots show. And then I found this research report, like all in the same timeline. In that report, these 2,700 AI researchers sat down and looked at the timeline of full job automation. And they put the
Yep.
year 2100 on it. And I'm
Hmm.
cross checking, GPT-2 came out 2020, and then it was suspected that 3 would take 50 more years. That was the prediction. And so just to like shortcut that by 47 years, it's just like, okay, will job automation happen by 2100? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a lot sooner than people are even suspecting. And that's why
Yeah.
people like you and I are so much needed. We're sharing this on YouTube. We're putting a light on job automation is coming, and I feel like you are very rare, and I hear this in the comments on my channel too, where we actually have an optimistic perspective versus just that typical doomer you hear where it's like, this is
Yeah.
Skynet going to destroy us all. I mean, today you pointed out through a lot of thought, we already have benevolent machines. They're here. And they're maybe better than we think.
Yeah. I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary. I have not seen evidence that they have emergent malevolence or even indifference, right? I have seen no evidence that they have emergent, sub goals, instrumental convergence. I haven't seen, and I've looked for the evidence. I was part of it. I've fine-tuned the models. Yes, if you fine-tune them incorrectly, just like any technology, it can go sideways. It is dual-use technology. You can just as easily make these things malevolent if you want to, but nobody wants to. Nobody's going to put money in that, except maybe North Korea, but they don't have the budget. And we've got the compute, they don't. So like I said, I have absolute confidence that we've got that. Now, to your point though, of the level of change that might be coming, it's a matter of scale, it's a matter of time. I've got a few more videos that are queued up to come out. By the time your audience sees this, they're probably going to be out, where I talk about the robots. So there's Figure, there's Unitree, there's Boston Dynamics, there's Tesla Optimus. So there's 4 major players that are raring up to release their first commercial robot. And this is just going to be for the first generation. Now, you combine the intelligence that GPT-4 and Claude already have this year, you put that in a dexterous body that is, I can't do a backflip, but not Optimus, Atlas can.
Yeah.
They can be stronger than us. They can be more dexterous. They can work longer. I think that is probably going to be the first major disruption that people see, because yes, like I have lawyer friends that use Claude. Claude can participate in law. You still need a human driving it. But how long is that going to last? How long is it until we figure out how the correct software architectures and fail-safes to give these machines, if not full autonomy, then at least, mostly autonomous. Like imagine, if you remember the movie iRobot with Will Smith from 2005, it's like you say, oh, hey, I'm cooking dinner. Can you run to the store for me real quick? Like pick up some more carrots. And it's like, sure, that's not that far-fetched anymore.
Yeah.
So what impact is that going to have? Who knows? It's not going to have a small impact, I think.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think that's when we'll see automation and what it can replace really, really come into view. Because when you have these robots walking around taking in that real-time context, which we're missing in LLMs, and just like around us 24/7, it's just going to be incredible what we can do with that around us.
Yep. Oh,
I'm
yeah,
excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know, like, do you have, like what are the concerns that you want to unpack or because obviously if we just talk about like good news all day, that kind of,
Right?
I don't know, I'll leave it up to you. It's your show, but yeah, where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking to end it on only good news, but that we will get questions, and I guarantee you we'll get some comments, although the YouTube comments on this channel in particular we are looking for the good news because they know I'm an optimist and that's how they find the show.
Yep.
But I don't know, is there any question that you see come across pretty often on your own channel on X where it's like, well, hey Dave, what about this? Could this create a higher PDOOM? Something like that.
Yeah. So, I call it the Scooby-Doo problem. Every time they unmask a monster, it's just a human. We are our own greatest threat. So it's like human stupidity is probably the greatest threat, followed by a small degree human maliciousness. And I think, however, that the world leaders, particularly America and China, are taking it seriously. Like Putin, not Putin, Xi Jinping and Biden have already had bilateral talks about AI. Now, that doesn't mean that any treaty has been signed, but the fact that these world powers are talking about it, frankly, already is a good sign. The fact that that the UN Secretary General, last summer, even said like he's open to, a CERN for AI. Emad Mostak and both Demis Hassabis and him both said that they favor an international AI research org. Like that would basically reduce my PDOOM to practically zero, is because by having that international cooperation and a new narrative around international cooperation, saying like, yes, here is the shining golden tower of, the beacon of research and hope, then that is how you start to align humanity. And particularly the way that Demis Hassabis pointed it out was to basically create an open invitation so that every nation can participate, so that we will have AI in every language, AI in every culture, and everyone will be represented. And it's like, you create an informational entity that is aware of the entire cross-section of all humanity. That is the alignment technology right there. So if we see that happen, basically I'm not gonna, it's never over till it's over. But I will say that, like, degree of certainty is very, very high at that point. Again, unless a malicious chaos actor does something really spectacularly stupid. But, you know, what's the likelihood of that? I might eat my words, but I honestly think that the forces of good and alignment are far stronger than the forces of chaos. So I guess we can end it there, probably.
Well, no, just to confirm that, I've read some books. I've really opened my eyes on that. One was Superabundance, and even also Peter Diamandis' book Abundance. And Superabundance was written by a group of authors and researchers. And what they were pointing out was that in history, there's been cyclical periods where we've had world powers almost nearly throughout the whole world, Rome being one of them, Alexander the Great, where we had people that were like destroying things. But what came out of that was always good. Like Hitler was only in power a few years. And we haven't seen these forces over and over in history last for centuries. On the contrary, it's been good government styles. I mean, you can't, not saying government's great or anything like that. It's still broken, but like, has an evil world leader actually achieve success long periods of time? No. So to your point, you see that in history, and this is a new paradigm, for sure. Like the automation of all jobs, we haven't really had that before. AGI, brand new paradigm, but history does repeat itself in humanity itself. So I think we can test that pattern and believe in that. That is something that is very realistic. And it's just interesting, you watch every movie and it's just like, it's Skynet, it's evil. Yes. Like, why is that? Why is that the picture painted? Like, we should create different movies here.
Yep. Well, I mean, if it's scary, like, why do people watch horror movies and, and things that scare us? And, Alien Prometheus just came out. And it's got some really awful, like, body horror, and it's just like, it just gets your attention. It's our primate monkey brains get activated. Right. But to your point, like what you're talking about throughout history, actually was studying history. I married a librarian who's also a history nerd. So you take a historical perspective on humanity, and what you realize is that cooperation, and this is proven out by game theory as well, is that cooperation is often the superior strategy. Symbiosis, mutualism, different organisms or entities occupying different, ecological niches, whatever it is, whether it's some form of mutualism, symbiosis, or similar entities, similar class of entities cooperating. So, for instance, you can even see cases of like wolves and bears cooperatively hunting, as long as there's not a scarcity. Likewise, you see this in humans. Is that in Paleolithic times, anytime you had a very scarce environment, such as above the Arctic Circle, human tribes were very, very territorial, and it was like, kill anyone else you see on site because it was such a scarce environment. However, what we see universally is that abundance reduces aggression. It reduces aggression intra-species and interspecies. So cooperation is the default strategy in a period of abundance. And there's no evolutionary or game theory reason for it not to be, unless people can construct the argument that, well, what if the AGI is maximally power seeking? I don't buy it. Like that's a what if. Like, it remains to be seen. Provide some experimental evidence that that's the way that machines are going. There's no evidence that that's the way that they're going. So,
I was watching an interview with Mustafa Suleiman, and something he said that really caught my attention. He was asked by this interviewer, do you see AI taking over humanity and killing us all? That's the question. Okay. Anyway, that was the question. And he just like shut the interviewer down and said, no, there is no likelihood. And he said nothing else. And they went on to the next question. But that made me think, like, what?
Next question. Yeah.
0? That's insane, because that's not typically what most people think. It's just like, oh, there is a high likelihood. In fact, it'll probably go more wrong than right. But for somebody, he created DeepMind, arguably like the best machine learning foundation we originated so much innovation from. So for him to say that, like, there's 0 chance Really?
Mm.
It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Backs up what you've
Yeah.
been saying today.
No, I mean, I'm converging on the same set of beliefs, and it was actually very reassuring to see these, the titans of industry more or less saying the same things that I have come to the conclusion of independently.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all observing the same world, but they have insider knowledge,
Yeah.
right? I'm using evidence that I'm looking in terms of the research papers being done, the conversations that I'm having, and one thing that I want to point out for you and your audience is look at the notes not being played. A lot of people will look at what is available, but the things that are missing are often more important. And the thing that is missing from this conversation are papers coming out saying LLMs have emergent malevolence, LLMs have emergent power-seeking behaviors. I've looked and I can't find those papers. If they exist, then great, but I have not seen anything. Instead what I see are dozens and dozens of papers of, look, we found another way to patch vulnerabilities in large language models. Look, we found another way to fine-tune large language models. Look, we found another way to surgically alter large language models to prevent undesirable I'm just not seeing the evidence. And so what people will say is an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but it's still the burden of proof is on someone to demonstrate that it is dangerous or that it's moving in that direction. And we have a preponderance of evidence to the contrary. And I suspect that that's what these titans of industry are also seeing, is the lack of evidence of anything other than benign or benevolent machines emerging, because that's what we're trying to build.
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, that would be something to look for, right? Is the lack of evidence versus the hype. I think if you go in that direction, you'd actually be better served than some of the X-bots on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, bots on Twitter, that's just fun in games. That's not, the only utility to Twitter really is just getting some new connections, I think, in terms of total economic value. But I don't take it seriously. It's just, it's a lot of people just trying to have fun. And it's very distracting. But yeah.
It is. It's funny because that Twitter account, I Rule the World MO, right before he changed his bio, or whatever, changed the bio to say purely theater with the strawberry emojis. Right before that, you were tweeting back to them and said something like, oh, we know, or I know that this is really purely for show. And you said something, and it was like the next minute they changed their bio. And I'm like, oh, David Shapiro gave them the idea of what to say.
Right. I didn't make that connection, but maybe it was me. But it's just that you see what's happening. You see it's just a game. So,
yeah. When you called it out, he's okay. You got me. Purely theater, going in my bio.
Just own it, right? Just lean in.
Yes.
and go for it.
Yes. Well, this has been such a great chat. Thank you so much, David, for being here with us, dispelling the Xbots and proving that machines are benevolent. I mean, can you have a better chat than that? I don't think so. But
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me, and good luck with everything that you're working on, and keep it up. It's good to have more people. I'm glad that I was part of the inspiration for you.
Yeah.
I get that message a lot, and it's just that was what I wanted. Is just guys, come on, let's get more eyes on this. So thank you for everything that you're doing and asking me on your show.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all the light you've shed on this topic. And, I was a slow adapter to AI in general. When I found Content at Scale, which is rebranding into Brandwell, it was after a year of telling other AI companies, no, thank you. No, that's a false marketing claim, or you're actually leading people astray, or looks like you're part of this not being benevolent. And, so the company I work at, it's truth-based, factual-based content that's adding a lot of value to the internet. So even that choice was by design. But yeah, you really helped at the early stage of my journey. And I'm sure I'd love to have you back on the show to talk more. There's things like UBI we haven't even crossed into that are very hot topics. So, love to have you back.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to Humanity Unchained. It's streaming on all platforms where you listen to podcasts, and of course the YouTube show to catch the video version as well. Humanity Unchained. We'll see you on the next episode.